The Return of the King. On the surface, it can be taken as the ultimate conservative expression, restoring the old power structure of better days to return to the mythologized golden age of the past. The film adaptation reinforces this view even more by omitting the Scouring of the Shire. But, as you've probably guessed, I think there's more going on here. So let's go back to the book's ending. After the big fight, defeating Sauron, restoring the line of kings by placing Aragorn on the throne, the four hobbits return home. Only, it's not home anymore. When they reach the town of Bree, the gate is closed. The curfew. This is a highly unusual and unwelcome development. I'm sorry, Master Merry, but we have orders. Whose orders? The chief's up at Bag End. Chief? Chief? Do you mean Mr. Lotho? Said Frodo. I suppose so, Mr. Baggins, but we have to just say the chief nowadays. Just pin that for now, the use of titles rather than names. The hobbits break in, they have a run-in with the sorry goons charged with guarding it, and they find that despite it being a good harvest year, there's rationing of food and supplies. We grows a lot of food, but we don't rightly know what becomes of it. It's all these gatherers and sharers, I reckon, going around counting and measuring and taking off to storage. They do more gathering than sharing, and we never see most of the stuff again. The chief's minions also hoard all the pipeweed, causing much irritation. It's not the laid-back, friendly place they remember. It seems almost as though it's under occupation, like they lost the war. All right, said Sam. That's quite enough. I don't want to hear no more. No welcome, no beer, no smoke, and a lot of rules and orc talk instead. I hope to have a rest, but I can see there's work and trouble ahead. Let's sleep and forget it till morning. The next day, word has traveled faster than they, and the road to Hobbiton is blocked. Several hobbits, sheriffs with sticks and feathers in their caps as badges of authority, inform Frodo and his companions that they are under arrest for a litany of petty offenses. To the discomfiture of the sheriffs, Frodo and his companions all roared with laughter. Don't be absurd, said Frodo. I am going where I please and in my own time. I happen to be going to Bag End on business, but if you insist on going too, well, that is your affair. Very well, Mr. Baggins, said the leader, pushing the barrier aside, but don't forget I've arrested you. They're part of a large force of sheriffs, charged with keeping people from moving about too much or breaking the many rules issued by the chief. And when the sheriffs aren't enough, there are men, big folk, hired to keep the more hot-headed hobbits in line. The Shire has become not only oppressive, but bureaucratized and impersonal. Houses have been abandoned or burned down. The Green Dragon pub is taken over by ruffians on the payroll of Sharky, the real boss. The chief is just a puppet, it turns out, easily replaced if he causes problems. The hobbits stir up a revolt, which is fairly easy since most were sick of the bullshit and just needed something to rally around, and they have a few little skirmishes with the men. Most of the hobbit sheriffs switch sides, and finally it is revealed that Sharky is in fact Saruman, or rather the sorry wretch that Saruman has become after his defeat. He propped up some figureheads, most notably the chief, to do his bidding and set about destroying the Shire out of revenge. A rather modern, impersonal sort of destruction through rules and organizations, which mirrors Saruman himself, as Treebeard said of him much earlier in the story. He has a mind of metal and wheels, and he does not care for growing things, except as far as they serve him for the moment. When this comes up in discussion, it's usually in the context of industrialization specifically and modernity more generally, as opposed to the traditional pastoral idea of the English countryside. And yeah, Tolkien said a lot about that, and it's woven all through the story. But there's also the depersonalizing of authority and where that can lead. There's a rather famous letter he wrote to his son during the war, where he says, in part, "My political opinions lean more and more to anarchy, philosophically understood, meaning abolition of control, not whiskered men with bombs, or to unconstitutional monarchy. I would arrest anybody who uses the word state in any sense other than the inanimate realm of England and its inhabitants, a thing that has neither power, rights, nor mind, and after a chance of recantation, execute them if they remained obstinate. If we could get back to personal names, it would do a lot of good. Government is an abstract noun, meaning the art and process of governing, and it should be an offense to write it with a capital G or so as to refer to people. If people were in the habit of referring to King George's council, Winston and his gang, it would go a long way to clearing thought and reducing the frightful landslide into theocracy. The anarchy bit gets quoted a lot, but the real meat here is the idea of the depersonalization of authority. Responsibility being with a nebulous they rather than a guy with a name and a face who can be held accountable for his decisions. Also, historians note here, this is a letter to his son. For every historical document, you have to ask who wrote it, who did they write it for, and why did they write it? Before someone takes that execute them line as a serious statement and goes off on what a monster he was and looking rather silly in the process. More to the point, it's central to the idea of kingship that's at the heart of the Lord of the Rings. The king not as a master, but as a reflection of the state. State in the sense Tolkien meant in this letter, the realm and all of its people, not the apparatus of government. The king as the personification of the land and the people. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark, as opposed to, we have a shit king right now, to borrow a line from Shakespeare's most overrated play. A connection between the monarch and the idea of the nation itself. They excel or decline together as one. And without the king, the nation is diminished. Gondor under the Stewards, slowly degrading, waiting in hope to be restored. This is one point where the film condenses it into a line much more concise than the book when Gandalf explains it to Pippin.
The line of kings failed. The White Tree withered. The rule of Gondor was given over to lesser men.
This lesser men idea comes up several times in the text, perhaps most directly in line here from the story of King Valakar told in the appendices. There was already rebellion in the southern provinces when King Valakar grew old. His queen had been a fair and noble lady, but short-lived according to the fate of lesser men, and the Dunedain feared that her descendants would prove the same and fall from the majesty of the kings of men. I have on a couple of occasions seen this used as a master race allegory. Don't pollute the blood thing. But this is a story built on mythic ideas, the philosophical over the physical. Looking at this purely in terms of genetics is kind of engaging in the mindset that Tolkien is attacking at multiple levels. It's fixating on the material, on the quantifiable, minds of metal and wheels. One of the central ideas is the replacement of the mythic with the mundane, both in terms of good and evil. The line of long-lived, closer to the gods, superior men replaced with mediocre stewards, regular men with fancy robes, a manager rather than a king. There's no majesty in that, it's just a job. But the Scouring of the Shire especially shows us the end of mythic evil too. A magical dark lord in his towering fortress giving way to the petty evil of functionaries, the tyranny of postings, of arbitrary prohibitions and permissions. Sauron is the old evil. The broken Saruman is a new evil, in part because he is petty and has to rely on posted notices and paid thugs to impose his will. And maybe most importantly, because he started out as good. Not posing as good or putting up an aspect to deceive, but genuinely well-meaning only to turn profoundly evil after a long period of rationalizations and expedient measures. And that's the evil of our world. Cog-minded lesser men convinced they're the good guys as they slowly destroy what they were once put there to protect. And I think that in the context of the much more widely discussed anti-industrial themes, Saruman cutting down the forest to feed his foundries, the armies of Mordor with mass-produced munitions-grade arms and armor contrasted with the elegant craftsmanship of the elves, it's all part of the same thing. I think that's the essence of Tolkien's objection to modernity. It took the beauty, the uniqueness, the epicness out of the world in pursuit of efficiency and orderliness. Represented in the physical space by tearing up the countryside to make smoke-belching factories, but also in the mental space, replacing larger-than-life rulers with mundane rules. In that sense, he's not really being contradictory when he mentions leaning both toward anarchy and unconstitutional monarchy. In this mythic ideal sense, a true king doesn't need constitutional constraints because he is a good and moral man who speaks honestly and keeps his word. The people don't need to be coerced into doing the right thing because they're a good and righteous people with their king to guide them by example. It is not meant as a program for a political system. Tolkien isn't suggesting that we scrap all the laws and make the king's rule absolute. Rather, he seems to be suggesting that the ideal, the mythic, is as important as the mundane. The enduring nature of his story seems to support that. And it's kind of a foreign idea for Americans. We expect our presidents to be both good managers and inspiring leaders, but they're often contradictory jobs. Probably why we so often get people that suck at both. And all of this is why Boromir is such an interesting character. He's caught between that higher nature of heroism and grand ideals and the corruptibility and weakness of lesser men. He slips between both ways of thinking. For the mechanistic modern mind of metal and wheels, using the ring to fight Sauron is perfectly reasonable. When you look at a weapon in quantifiable materialist terms, you are evaluating it in terms of what it does to your enemy. Is it enough to win and save all that we're trying to defend from this aggressor? But the whole heart of the story is what it does to you. Not only is it corrupting, making you into the thing you fight, but simply defeating an enemy isn't victory, it's just killing some guys. There has to be something more, something higher. Boromir kind of gets that at the end. He overcomes the draw of the power to destroy and instead dies to protect something. I take it as a reminder that we lesser men aren't hopeless. We just have to try a lot harder to be like the line of kings. And on this day, it seems particularly appropriate to say that America has no king. America needs no king. But we do have a lot of steaks, and I'm going to go grill some up.